So, good afternoon, all. Hope you're enjoying your day. Um, I'm Scott Kraus. I'm the ATDCFL president, and I have the pleasure of presenting Britne. She's going to give us a um, awesome presentation on accessibility for online learning. Um, as you may have heard if you are on, she's out in Denver actually attending and working at a conference right now. So, she's busy, definitely an expert in her field, normally with the Las Vegas chapter. Um, and all right, moving on. Um, for ATD CFL, we're always looking for more volunteers and board members. We're actually about to begin the nomination process for anybody interested in potentially joining our board. Saying that, here are some of our open roles. Looking for VP of operations, and a big one here, looking for a VP of programs. We want to bring back more live programming next year. So if you're interested, even in supporting in any way, let us know and we'll be glad to work with you and have you. All right. Last piece I have. Um, if you are a chapter member, if you join ATD National, you can become a power member. It has a lot more perks and benefits. As you can see here, you get access to all the training articles, their work guides, you get discounts, webinars. So lots of cool features. If you have any questions, again, let us know. And almost done. ATD capability model. ATD switched to this within the last few years. If you want to test yourself, you can go to the ATD website and actually get an assessment and tell you which areas you're strong, which areas you may want to work on as a talent development professional. And this is the last slide. So our upcoming events in October, we have another webinar. Um, We have a networking and new member meetup. So we invite all our old and veteran members to join as well to meet the new members and do some networking. It's going to be a lot more relationship and discussion based as opposed to history based because we now have a nice webinar or a self-paced course that goes with it. And then in November, um, collaborating across generations, particularly looking at leading the fun Generation C individuals. So we are hoping to get a, a Space Coast SIG event up probably November timeframe, and then we'll have an end of year event in December. So those still to come. All right, with that, I will turn it over to Britne. Thanks, Britne.
Thanks so much, Scott. Let me get my screen share up here. And hopefully you are all able to now see a bright yellow screen with a QR code. And I hope you know what to do with a QR code. Let me get all of my windows resituated as you scan the code. Or if you're on your desktop and you prefer to just use the web browser, you can type in menti.com and then enter that 8-digit code. So this is going to be a very interactive presentation today. So I hope you'll participate in Menti. If you do not feel like using the Menti, would rather just use Zoom chat, things like that, I've got chat windows open so we can make this the most accessible and interactive experience for all of you. So this session is accessibility for online learning, and I've designed this session for anyone that obviously develops or delivers online learning, but also if you manage online learning programs and you need to know how to run these things in your department. And all of it. So we think e-learning modules, but then there's, virtual courses and videos and electronic PDFs and LMSs and all of these, digital things that we use for learning. So all of that online learning, we're going to talk about how to make that accessible today. And actually today, so I'm going to arm you with checklists and some resources, links to different pages and tools you can use. So you really will be able to start doing course accessibility today. As soon as you leave the session, like if you were to go back to work right after, you could start implementing right away is my goal. So with that, hopefully you've all been able to get logged into the Menti. You should see two buttons once you get logged in. There's a heart. If you want to click the heart, you'll see what happens there. Little hearts pop up on the screen. It lets me know that you either liked something, resonated with the information, it was new to you, just something you want to remember. You can always heart it. And then the other one is a Q&A button. So of course you can drop a question in the Zoom chat and I'll be reading that throughout the presentation. But if you just want to, ask an anonymous question, we'll have time for Q&A at the end and you can use the Menti for that as well. So hopefully I've chatted enough and given you all a chance to get logged into that Menti. So let's get started talking about making online learning accessible. In like any good instructional designer, I do have objectives for my session, and we're going to do something fun with the Menti, and we're going to prioritize the objectives. So I will talk about all of these things, the different types of disabilities and assistive technology that you might encounter, how that translates to some challenges experienced by our disabled learners. And then we'll jump right into creating accessible online learning. And then the fun part, evaluating the accessibility of all that stuff you've already created and now need to kind of take a second look at. We'll also weave in some convincing your boss or your team to prioritize accessibility in your work. And there's a something else option. So if you did vote something else, then let me know what that is in the Q&A or in the chat, and we will definitely make sure we have time to get to that as well. So starting to see some responses in the Menti. I'll give it another moment. Again, if you want to use the chat and just tell me what your priority is today, we can do that as well. Not too surprising that I usually see high votes in creating and evaluating the online learning. But I do think the other things are important as well to kind of understand the context and then maybe help convince some of those outliers on your team that aren't quite as convinced of how important this is. All right, seeing the votes change just a little bit here. Love it. Thank you for participating. And we'll go ahead and we will jump into prioritizing these accordingly. So hi, I'm Brittany. I've been talking at you for a few minutes, but I haven't officially introduced myself. If you can't see the picture on the screen, I am a white woman with short red hair. Today I'm wearing glasses. I usually don't. I've been traveling though. And I have been doing accessibility for quite some time throughout a lot of different fields. So I started my career as a kid with a computer that could make web pages and learned about, web accessibility and the things we need to do to make websites accessible to people with disabilities. And then I, went to college, went to grad school, and I studied library science. So I worked in libraries as a librarian for several years and dealt with how the public accesses information in different forms that we hold in a library. And then I, from there, got into corporate training. I've been there for about 15 or so years. And then, of course, accessibility presents itself there as well. So any kind of electronic material that we are creating, dispersing, having our learners learn about their jobs, all of that really matters for accessibility. And it's, I pause here and say that we have very important jobs. We are often the curators of information. We are the ones that make sure that people understand or learn or get information they need to do their jobs in the workplace. And if we aren't making that accessible to everyone, then we're severely limiting even their potential to do their job. So I pause here and we're very important in the way we curate information, and we need to make sure that that is as accessible as possible. All right, back to a few fun facts in the Menti. We'll get through some of these basics rather quickly, but I like to set the scene. Latest numbers from the CDC, this was in July of this year. 29%, rounded up slightly, 28.7% of adults in the United States are disabled in some way. Now we're going to break that down and talk about different kinds of disabilities and what that looks like. But I want you to think for a moment about the audience that you design training for, deliver training for. So your workplace, your school, your audience. How many disabled people do you think are in your population as a percentage? So percentage of people you design training for, 30% of adults are disabled. You might have about 30% of your population disabled in the workplace. Someone did surprise me on this question one time. I always like to mention it. Someone did put 100%. They did work with a group of disabled people, and that was like the function of their business was that it was a group with autism. So yeah, of course, 100% of our employees have autism. That's our goal here. So people have surprised me. But I think I might surprise you here. Would it surprise you if it was 5% in the workplace? And I just told you it was 30% of all adults. So why the discrepancy here? So this number comes from a different survey. This is the corporate self-identification rate of disabled employees. So this is people who will voluntarily say on a demographic survey that asks, various questions about gender and race and orientation. If there is a disability question, about 5% of people will say, yes, I have a disability. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of stigma surrounding disabilities, especially in the workplace. There's a common thought that maybe people with disabilities aren't as able to perform their job as some others without disabilities. So a lot of stigma exists, and a lot of people will not self-identify because they want to avoid some of that stigma in the workplace. But I have a few other numbers for you. Bureau of Labor Statistics release from February of this year says about 22% of the disabled population is employed, compared with about 67% of the non-disabled population being employed. So again, we don't have 100% employment anywhere, but there's still a big disparity in that number of disabled employees versus non-disabled employees. One more study for you. This was back in 2017. A study asked of disabled people how they communicate with others at work. So about 39% will tell their direct manager about their disability. About 25% will tell the rest of their teammates, and about 20% go to HR for an accommodation officially. So again, and that's of the disabled people in the workplace, that only about 30% of them are even asking for any kind of assistance at work. So all of these numbers, bunch of statistics, hopefully this helps convince you that prioritizing accessibility is something we need to do for everyone, even if they aren't identifying themselves with a disability. So let's jump for a second. Let's talk about those kinds of disabilities that you might see in the workplace. About 6% of the adult population has a form of blindness. That does include color blindness as well as low vision. About 6% have some kind of hearing deficit, either complete hearing loss, deafness, or partial hearing loss. 12% have some kind of motor impairment that affects their mobility. And 14% have some kind of cognitive impairment. Now, I told you I was a librarian and not a math major. This does not add up to that 29%. It's a little bit more than that, but that is because some people do have multiple disabilities. So some of these things may overlap in the population. But when you're thinking about disabilities, are you only thinking about the permanent ones? What about all of those other situations that could temporarily or situationally impair someone and stop them from being able to learn or to be able to do their job? Here's a good example of an accessibility fix that I did one time that helped a non-disabled population. I worked in a factory, and it was common when a production line went down for maintenance that those employees would still need some work to do. So the manager said, get on your training and make sure you're all caught up on your training courses. Well, the problem was, their machine was down, but not every other factory machine was down. It was loud, it was noisy. So they're sitting there trying to do a little training module and they can't hear it. So we, of course, added captions and transcripts, a very common accessibility fix. But this then allowed our learners in a noisy factory environment to be able to still get that same knowledge. They could either read the transcript or follow along with the captions during their learning, so that if they couldn't hear something, they still got the information. And this is an accessibility fix that does help multiple people. I'll give you a link to download this image later if you want to share it with others. But from the Microsoft Inclusive Design Toolkit, just some good representations of ways we might not think about disability in the workplace. Yes, I saw some hearts there. Good, love the hearts. All right, let's talk for a minute about some of the kinds of assistive technology you might see. So people with disabilities use various kinds of assistive technology to manage their disability, work around their condition, and generally perform things on the job. So the first one I want to talk about is a very common one, a screen reader or text-to-speech software. And also the reverse is a thing now, speech-to-text software. So lots of really neat language processing tools out there. There is a big difference, though. A text-to-speech software would be used by someone with sight. So someone that is able to select a passage of text and have it read back to them aloud. So this would be maybe for someone with dyslexia that has trouble processing, a long paragraph of information. They may choose to use their text-to-speech software and select that text, have it read back so they can hear it. Now, a screen reader, on the other hand, very sophisticated piece of technology, would be used by someone without sight to completely navigate their computer, their device, whatever they're using. The screen reader performs all functions. So all navigation, open browser, open application, search for this, anything that you would normally be able to see and navigate your way through with a keyboard or mouse, a screen reader will perform those functions with the keyboard and then text output. The reverse of that, speech to text, again, helps people with various kinds of disabilities. They may have motor issues and not be able to type text as quickly as someone without that motor impairment. So they may choose to use the speech to text to then talk into their device and have it printed out. Input-output alternatives are another one that you might see often, normally in the form of things like ergonomic keyboards and mice and joysticks and other input devices that we might hook into our computers. And I've got a really neat one on the screen if you're able to see the presentation. This one is a refreshable Braille reader. So what happens with this, it plugs into the device and those little white pins, they pop up to form the Braille letters. So the Braille reader moves down the screen in order, pops up the Braille pins so the person can read across the Braille, the pins fall down, and then pop up again in the new position. So just fascinating piece of technology. You may not see that one in the workplace, but it is something that exists, and it's helpful to know that your learners may be interacting with your learning in a variety of different ways. Display enhancement tools are another common one. So the functions that let you change the colors of your screen or your magnification, those are some display enhancement tools that are usually built into systems. And there's a lot of other tools built in as well. So if you take a poke around the accessibility features in your Microsoft device, your iOS device, it can be your desktop computer, your laptop, or even your phone. Poke around at some of those accessibility features that exist, and you'd be surprised at how much is actually built into systems these days for things like text sizing, color contrast, even some of those text-to-speech features. All right. Back to the Menti though. I've talked at you for a couple minutes and I'm not a fan of doing that without a bunch of interaction. So of all of those disabilities and assistive tech that I mentioned, have you encountered any of those in the workplace or even in your personal life? It's something that you might use yourself. So just give me a word or two. What kinds of disabilities have you encountered and what kinds of assistive tech as well? I see color blindness has already popped up. Text to speech. I'm not sure if this audience knows this, but it's actually more likely for males to be colorblind than females by a factor of like 1 to 8. So like for every 8 men with color blindness, there is one female with color blindness. It's a weird trick of genetics. We've seen some with screen readers, text to speech, text reader. Yeah, those are probably the most common. I've worked with people with screen readers and doing accessibility testing and things myself. Oh, someone hard of hearing. Yep. Color blindness coming up again. Some of these things, when it comes to like vision and hearing, we don't even think sometimes that we may be future-proofing for ourselves. We will all, eventually lose some hearing, lose some vision, lose even motor function as we age. So think about this even as, future-proofing for your own needs when you consider accessibility features. Love it. All right. So what does this really mean for disabled learners? In the simplest terms, I'd say that we just don't want to discriminate, right? There's a lot of laws out there. We have things like the ADA in the United States. There are various accessibility laws in different countries as well. But in most developed nations, it is legislation really requires us to not discriminate against disabled people, to make sure that they have the same access to goods, to services, to learning, to working that the rest of the non-disabled population has. So we've talked about those kinds of impairments. We've talked about the assistive tech. We've talked now about the laws and why we have to do this. So let's jump into, for the rest of the session, actually creating some accessible online learning. So I know many of you came here just for this. And so we're going to jump into the Menti and do a brainstorm. I want to hear from you. What are those interactive elements in your online learning that you have a challenge with when it comes to accessibility? Now I'm going to jump into a few quick wins that apply to like every scenario, but I want to brainstorm here for a minute, and then if we don't get your interaction covered by those general tips, we'll pause again after that and make sure we talk about any of those little tricky things that you're working on. Things like drag and drop and matching and quizzes and what else do I usually get on this one? Forms. People usually ask how to make forms accessible. Documents, PowerPoints, PDFs, all the things. So what is it that you are working on the most that you are concerned about making accessible? And you don't have to fill out all the responses. I think there's like maybe 5 spaces. Just give me as many as you're thinking. Ooh, image carousels. That's one. Carousels can be very tricky in general. I know for if you're doing it in Rise, they actually caution against using some of the carousel features in their accessibility notes because the carousels are very challenging to navigate using just the keyboard and having it read the correct information. That's a good one to call out. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Clickable, drag and drops, forms. These are all of those interactive things that we need to consider. Forms and PDFs, yes, for sure. Click interaction, phone interactions, breakout rooms. Yeah, yeah, we've got drag and drop up there twice, so we're going to definitely talk drag and drop. All right, let's jump into some of those very quick wins that are going to apply to a lot of, I keep seeing more come up. Whiteboards and GIFs, love it. Thank you for continuing to contribute there. I am going to jump ahead though. Let's talk some of those very quick design wins that are going to do some accessibility fixes for you kind of at a high level. So if you can take care of some of these very quick things, you're going to be miles ahead on making your online learning accessible. So I will share a longer checklist for you at the end of the session, but let's jump in and just start talking about things like alt text. We've all probably heard alt text. It is alternative text, if you don't know. And that is what a screen reader will output in place of an image. So obviously, someone who was without sight cannot see the image that you place on your page. They need text to determine what that image might be. We are going to do a little practice activity on alt text after this. But alt text is good for a lot of reasons, not just those without sight, but those with cognitive processing disorders may choose to turn off images on a page if it's overwhelming and distracting, and they may choose to read the text only. And people with slow bandwidth connections, actually, the alt text will load first before the image. So someone can choose if they want to finish loading the rest of that image or if they're satisfied with just the alt text. Lots of uses for alt text out in the world. So we will do a little practice activity on that one next. The other one, kind of top of mind accessibility fix is color contrast. I will give you some tools for this. There's various rules and ratios out there of what is a pass and fail, but a lot of the tools out there will just give you a simple, yes, this is good, or no, this is not good contrast for people with disabilities and low vision, being able to distinguish those colors. Again, this is something that helps people that are not just disabled people, but all kinds of people. Have you ever tried to view, especially your cell phone, if you're outside and it's really sunny and it kind of washes out your screen? Good color contrast helps in those kinds of situations as well. So people with different lighting conditions benefit as well as those with disabilities. Captions and transcripts, I already mentioned, but making sure that all of your audio video material does have a text alternative for those who are unable to either see or hear, that they do have the text available that they can use their assistive technology to work with. And again, helps those of us that are learning languages or working with people in multiple countries with different dialects. And it's just having captions on meetings and transcripts after the fact can really help people understand not just those with disabilities, but those language learners as well. I always turn on my captions. I watch a lot of British TV, Doctor Who, and things like that. And the accents, I sometimes can't even make out the words. So I watch it with the captions, and I'm not hard of hearing at all. I just can't figure out the Scottish accent. All right. Readability is the next one on my list, and I include this one because it's something that I think often gets overlooked when it comes to accessibility. We think about the technical things that we need to do. Does it have alt text? Does the color contrast work? Are all the pieces there? But readability is more about the content that you have. And is it written in plain language to the lowest reading level that necessary for your audience? Things like including headers to break up long chunks of information, keeping the most important information at, top of mind, top of page, getting rid of those extraneous details. I know our SMEs are so terrible for this. They want to include absolutely everything. But readability really makes sure that we are getting our learners the content that they need in the most accessible and readable format. And kind of related to that is the navigation and structure of your document or your e-learning or your whatever you're creating, making sure that your learners are able to navigate no matter what kind of software or assistive technology they're using. So this often means in your Word documents, your PowerPoints, your PDFs, using some of those built-in styles that tell the document that it's a header or tell the document that this is a list, a bullet list, a numbered list. Those things aren't just for, making things look nice. They give structure to the document so that someone with assistive technology like a screen reader can do things like jump from header to header or select the third list item in a list. So a lot of those structural things that we do to documents really help people with assistive technology. So if you've just been, creating headers by making bold, big text and not using those built-in styles, you may be doing a disservice to some of your disabled learners. All right. Don't have time to show this video. We'll give you a link. If it's a longer presentation, I show this one. So this is a slide I keep in here. But this is a wonderful resource. It is in the ATD toolbox. So if you're a national member, you should have access to this. It is a video from Diane Elkins. It's about 6 minutes long, and she shows you how to optimize specifically articulate storyline for a screen reader. And I love this video because she gives a before and after. So what it's like with a non-optimized storyline module and how a screen reader user experiences that. And then she shows you how to fix a few things and what that new experience looks like for that screen reader user on that same slide. So great video. Don't have time to show it. We'll give you a link for it. If you work with storyline, I very highly recommend you giving Diane's video a watch. But let's do a quick practice activity and practice writing our own alt text. So I have a few examples here, and I'll let you choose which alt text you like better, and I'll give you a few guidelines as you're deciding. So the two options are a hot air balloon or a black and rainbow striped hot air balloon floats against a light blue sky. So good alt text is, well written and descriptive, but includes context as well as content. So why is this image being used on this page? So we could have, picture of hot air balloon and it's random, but if I were, teaching a course about, festivals and it was including a balloon festival, this might have a bit more context to the alt text. It might say, a black and rainbow striped hot air balloon floats against the light blue sky at the Reno Balloon Festival, giving more context to my image. And then one more tip for alt text, not everything needs alt text. So if you have decorative images that do not provide any actual content, you do not want to put alt text on those because it actually provides a very different experience for a screen reader user. If they were, image of hot air balloon, image of a telephone, and then image of curly Q, image of divider, image of divider, image of curly Q. All of those non-informational things can actually clutter up the experience for a screen reader user. So you do not want to include alt text on decorative images. All right, so everyone voted for the longer alt text on this one, and I'll tell you, it's a trick question. Neither one of these is actually wrong alt text. You may prefer or choose to use different ones in different situations. So I'll give you a good example of why I would have used the shorter alt text. So let's say I was creating, someone voted for it. I see you change your vote. I was designing an activity where the learner had to very quickly choose, a series of 3 objects, and they had to choose the correct one. So it was image of hot air balloon and telephone and water bottle. I don't even remember what they were. But so there were 3 images, and the user had to quickly make a selection. Now, for someone that was using assistive technology, I wanted them to have the same experience where they could get a short and fast description. So it was a hot air balloon, a telephone, and a water bottle. And that was all the alt text was. Because if I was asking them to, quickly review and make a quick decision, a black and rainbow striped hot air balloon floats against a light blue sky. A black telephone sits on a desk, blinking with a light. Like, all of these other details weren't really necessary for the activity I was creating. So again, you may prefer shorter alt text for certain kinds of activities. You may prefer longer, more contextual alt text for others. Neither is actually wrong. So your turn to practice. I have a picture here of a man on a sand dune, but I think you can do better. I think you can add a bit more flavor to this alt text. And for context, I'll tell you, I am designing a course for the Nevada Park Service, and it is for new hikers. Someone going out on their first hike, it gives them some safety, some different, gear, equipment, things they might want to bring with them, things they might need to do to prepare. So this is an image that I've included in this course. I'll give you a moment to write your own alt text. I think you can do better than man on sand dune. A man sitting on a sand dune wearing a parka and ball cap stares off into the distance. I love that. We tell what he's wearing, and we know that he's, facing away or staring away into something in the distance. Uh, a man wearing a hat, coat, and pants sits on a sand dune after a hike. A man sitting on a sand dune viewing the mountains around him. Love that. We're getting more pieces here. I'll share with you the one that I wrote earlier. A man in a blue jacket and green cap sits on a sand dune facing away from the camera towards mountains in the distance. And again, mine's not perfect either. I've had people, describe even in more detail what he was wearing, blue jacket with an orange collar. Um, Talked about, wearing black hiking boots, sitting on a tan sand dune, looking at dark mountains in the distance. Again, none of these are wrong, and none of them are, the definitive correct answer. The purpose of this is to kind of illustrate for you that everyone will see something different in the image. And it's a really great way to practice writing alt text by socializing it this way. So if you're unsure about the alt text that you've written, go ahead, give it a try, and then show someone else the same image and ask them to write the alt text. See what else they caught that maybe you didn't. Can you combine or make a conglomeration of several people's alt text and really get it to the description that works best for your course or activity? Let's do one more. We'll skip the voting here. I have a picture of a child smiling, and I think you can do a little better. We have a child smiling, and this picture is going into a course about festivals around the world. So maybe this girl is relevant to some kind of festival. I don't know. I will tell you the best response I got for this one though was a girl straight out of the Barbie movie. Someone had fun with their alt text, and I love it. Give it just one more minute to get some responses here. You can use the Zoom chat as well if you want. You don't have to use the Menti if that's inaccessible for you. All right, a close-up image of a young child covered in pink paint, looking at the camera and smiling. Love it. I've had others include things like a young girl with dark skin and brown eyes, covered in pink paint. A smiling child stares at the camera covered in pink and green paint. A young girl with colorful paint in her hair on her face smiles at a festival event. Yeah, some people even in the past have included the actual festival that she was at, the Festival of Colors or the Holy Festival. Other than Barbie movie, of course, we have, an Indian girl or a dark skinned girl, dark haired girl, covered in festival paint, in holy colors, festival of colors, lots of different ways we can describe this image as well. Barbie movie's just fun. I always come back to that one. Love this here. Let me read this one. A smiling young girl facing the camera with pink spray painted hair, a pink shirt, and remnants of pink and green face paint. Love it. Great job, everyone. All right. Hopefully that shows you that, writing alt text isn't all that intimidating. It isn't an exact science. There is usually no right or wrong, and you can always make it better by socializing and getting a few other opinions. So let's talk just for a second about, I know drag and drop came up twice. So drag and drop is one people ask a lot about accessibility. And unfortunately, you can tell by my voice, drag and drops are not accessible. There's ways to do it with code, there really is. But for something to be fully accessible, it needs to be able to be navigated by the keyboard only. So without any kind of mouse or touch input. And that's very challenging to do with things like drag and drop that you want someone to select, pick up, drag over, and then unselect to drop. So someone without motor movement or without that range of mouse or hand movement would not be able to complete this kind of activity. So there's coding ways to do it. I don't even know how to do it with code plus storyline. I think I can do it code plus website, but it looks different to make that actually navigable with a keyboard. So select with keyboard, move with keyboard, drop with keyboard. And kind of building on that, I would question if you're building one of these drag and drop activities, is it a valid assessment of a skill? So are they dragging and dropping in real life? If not, maybe we're just creating interactivity for interactivity's sake. Do they really need to learn how to drag and drop something from one place to another? Now, an example I use, I go back to the factory. I built a simulation of one of the production lines where someone on the line would have to pick up an item and move it to the next spot. So in the simulation, there is a drag and drop where they have to move something from one spot to the next. And I kept this in there because it's a valid exploration of that skill. So if someone's not able to drag and drop in their simulation, we may have questions about can they do that drag and drop motion on the job? Are they able to have that same range of motion? Are we limiting something only in our activity? So I would challenge you to explore other ways of creating interactivity, unless it's actually a good representation of the tool. The other one someone brought up one time is showing a new server how to set a table at a fancy restaurant where you've got like 20 pieces of silverware. Yes, you might want to have them drag and drop things into the right place because they would be doing that on the job and in real life. If it's drag and drop, matching flashcards, things like that, that don't really relate to a real life skill, I just try a more accessible way of doing it. You can still be plenty interactive and use things like a word bank where someone has to type in the correct word instead of dragging an object from one place to the next. So lots of ways we can still create interactivity with our materials, with our content, but avoid some of those accessibility challenges, especially like drag and drop. The other one I get questions about often is things like gating and timing, where you have to it comes up in compliance courses a lot too, where someone needs to spend X amount of time on the course, or they need to have completed X number of slides in the course. And some of these can be accessibility challenges as well. I just caution if you're using things like, locked navigation, that there is, a backdoor, a way that someone using some kind of assistive technology is able to navigate around, whether that's unlocking your menu, or some other things. Just really consider the people that have disabilities using assistive technology, how they might encounter some of those blocks that you've put in place. All right, so here's the fun part. I've told you how to make a course accessible from the start with some alt text and captions and transcripts and color contrasts and all of those things, but how do we evaluate what it is we already have? Because I know you're all sitting here thinking, oh, I didn't add alt text to those last four courses that I made. How do I go back and check these things now? So first of all, quick question for you. Who is it that is doing any of your accessibility work? So is this your e-learning designer developer doing it themselves, self-testing? That's great. I was a self-tester myself for many years before I worked someplace that did have a QA team that would QA all of our courses. We had, you can get various certified testers to test things. Some of those platforms like Upwork, you can hire someone with certifications to test. A lot of people do user testing, piloting, making sure you're including people with disabilities in your pilot groups so that you're getting some of that accessibility knowledge, or those with no testing yet, and that's okay. That's why you're here. You're learning how to do it today. All right. But yeah, I see most of us do what I did for years is testing it yourself as the developer because you got no one else, so it's all on you. That's great. These are the tools that are going to help. So the first tool that I use is something I create myself, and this is called a disability persona. You may have heard of personas used in marketing and some other fields, and it's really just a profile of an individual. In this case, an individual with a disability. So some of my examples, I have a learner with neurodivergence, and so she has ADHD and dyslexia. And I have another in my archive of personas here, someone with a fine motor challenge and cannot use a mouse, has to use a keyboard, does not have really fine range of motion in their hands. So the point of creating these different profiles of people is so that you can kind of see your course through their lens, put on their hat, really sit in their shoes for a moment and try to experience your course, your learning material from their perspective. So here are the things I include in my personas. Obviously, the nature of the limitation that the person has, any kind of assistive technology that they might use to overcome that limitation, the frequency that they use that assistive technology, and their skill level with it. And this is important because it might be assistive technology that they only need to use at work, that they don't use at home, so they might have less familiarity with it. Or on the reverse, this may be an assistive device that someone uses every day to perform all kinds of tasks, so they don't need additional training when it comes to the workplace. But again, I have created several of these personas. You can Google for ideas to create personas. ChatGPT and the language models can help as well. But I really encourage you to write your own personas. And that's why I'm not, sharing some of my examples other than just in text, because I really think that when you do the work to create the persona yourself and do that research about those kinds of limitations, it's going to give you just that much richer knowledge and experience when you start using the personas if you've created them yourself. So definitely look out there. There's plenty of examples, but sit down and write a profile yourself of a disabled learner and then use those profiles to test your own learning. All right. What about those testing tools, you say? Let's talk about the fun ones that I use all the time. So again, testing things you already have, testing along the way as you're creating these tools can kind of work in a lot of ways into your workflow. The first one I use a lot is the Wave Web Checker. And I use this one because it captures everything. So as a former web developer, I'm familiar with some of the random nonsense in this report, like ARIA tags, which you'll never need. But it's really great because it's a full report, all your color contrast, all your missing alt text, all your header levels, this header is nested wrong, and anything you might need from anything with HTML output. So not just a website. This is your RISE course, your Storyline course, anything you can open up in a web browser. Most PDFs and Word documents you can actually run through this as well. So a great kind of comprehensive look, checks for everything, a good overall view. Like once you finished your RISE course, just drop it through the Wave checker and see if you missed any alt text and things like that. Also from WebAIM, they have a wonderful little color contrast checker. I use theirs probably the most often because, again, it lives in the browser. It's a little browser bookmarklet. You click on it and it opens a little pop-up widget with a color selector. You just select the two colors and it tells you pass or fail. Really can't get much simpler than that. There are tons of other color contrast checker apps out there. I just happen to like this one the best because it lives in the browser. And again, anything I can open up in my browser, PDFs, Word documents, RISE courses, Storyline courses, all of it works with the browser contrast checker. For readability, my favorite is the Hemingway app. If you've not heard of Hemingway app, it helps you write like Hemingway. So the author Hemingway has a very concise, crisp, you can tell it's his writing. Sorry, I was an English major. Definitely love Hemingway, love the style, and this it just take any of your text, drop it into Hemingway app, and it will help you clean up taking out extraneous words or giving you new suggestions for readability. So again, plenty of other readability checker apps. I think there's one called Readable, but Hemingway is definitely my favorite. And then the final tool that I have for you here, this one is actually a download for a screen reader. So if you are on a Mac, iOS, Apple device, you have a built-in screen reader software. It is called VoiceOver. If you are on a PC, you do not. So you need to download a piece of software to do any screen reader testing. This is the one that I recommend because it is free and open source. It is called NVDA. The other probably major player out there in the screen reader world is JAWS. You may have heard of that one, but that one is a paid piece of software. Again, different features, different users prefer, JAWS or NVDA or VoiceOver, depending on their own preferences. But if you would like to try out your own e-learning with a screen reader of your own, then absolutely try and download this one and give it a little whirl. Caution, you're not going to learn it in an afternoon. You're going to need to spend a weekend, a week. Screen reader software, again, very comprehensive, sophisticated software. So you might need a little time to learn how to use all those functions, but then once you can use that for testing your own learning, it makes a world of difference to be able to see some of those screen reader annoyances and things like in Diane's video. All right. Again, I'll give you links to all of those here in a moment. Let's quickly wrap up a bit though. How do we make the case? And I've told you all of these, great ways we can do the work and all of the reasons why we should, but how do we start convincing others that this is really what we need to be doing? So the first thing I shared with you was statistics, and I wove in stories as well. So statistics plus stories really is just a model that works for a lot of people, giving them the facts and then giving them the little story of, hey, I made this accessibility change and here was a learner that I helped, or here was a group of learners really helped by this change that we made. Use that story and carry it forward as an example of the work that you're doing. We use that Microsoft image to talk about the situational impairments and even how that translates into having alternate formats for our materials. So maybe not just a video, but a text output as well for those factory workers with loud production lines. And then finally, I think that doing accessibility just makes us better at what we do in instructional design and training delivery. If we're really using that ADDIE model like we should be, we are analyzing our learners and understanding their disabilities and their limitations. We are evaluating the learning that we've done and making sure that it, checks all the boxes and really people have learned and been able to acquire a new skill from the training that we put out. So are we making sure that our learning is effective for everyone in an accessible way? And this really does just make us better at what we do. All right. So finally, a little time for Q&A. I know we're moving awful fast here. Let me get into these. When is it appropriate to use short versus long alt text? I'd say general practice is keep your alt text to about the length of a tweet, which I think these days like 260, 240 characters, something like that. That is a good length for an alt text. Short, but yet descriptive enough. I would, obviously for the activity that I gave you the example, water bottle, telephone, hot air balloon. If you want to make it shorter for a specific purpose, by absolutely all means do so. I wouldn't be writing long paragraphs unless it's really absolutely necessary for someone to understand completely all of the detail and context. So just as a good general practice, keep it about a tweet. And that'll keep you on the right track there. Good question. Mark this answered. And any other questions? No, I think that is just the one. Let me check in the chat as well. Any other questions? I know we've got a small group, so if you want to just maybe come off mute and ask any questions that you have, and I'll go ahead and jump ahead to the resources slide and let you get that. Sorry, if it's a 1 hour, 30 minute, then we do a little activity where I quiz you. And it's fun. We'll do that next time. Here is this QR code will take you out of the Menti to a separate page that has not only my contact information, but every link that I have shared in this presentation is on this page, as well as a bunch of other resources as well. So that checklist, this is a downloadable that is available on the link tree. All of my contact information, reach out to me, continue the conversation. Let's chat on LinkedIn or email or wherever is convenient for you. So I want to be your accessibility resource. Follow up with me if you've got questions after this presentation for sure. But I am going to turn it back over to the group here. Let me know what questions you have for me in the minute or two we have left.
Brittany, for course development, do you have any tools that you recommend? Articulate seems like it's pretty accessible, friendly.
Yes, I highly recommend the Articulate products. They have like accessibility working groups and discussion forums, and they are so big on accessibility as a company. Anything you need to know about the accessibility of Articulate products, you'll be able to find their documentation. There are cheat sheets that tell you, this kind of carousel is not accessible, and here's what you might want to do instead. So all of the Articulate products, they are very well documented when it comes to accessibility. And again, the user forums and things are great for the Articulate software as well. So lots of people asking and solving those accessibility questions. It's been a while since I've used some of the other platforms out there. When it comes to virtual presentations, Mentimeter and Poll Everywhere are your accessible ones. Slido is not, Aha Slides is not. When it comes to just very basic things like including alt text on an image. So if you were in my Mentimeter on your phone, you would be able to pull up alt text on all of those images because I set them in the Mentimeter. Not every platform allows you to do that. So designing virtually, e-learning platform, I would go Articulate. Presenting virtually, I love Mentimeter. Poll Everywhere is also very good. Good question.
Awesome.
All right.
Brittany,
Alicia, do you
hi,
have a
it's
question?
Alicia. I
Hi.
don't have a question, I have a comment. I just want to say thank you because so often we do net learns or go to training sessions and don't get the hands-on practice that you provided for us today. So that was amazing and very helpful as we move on and incorporate this into our training programs. I appreciate you adding that into your presentation, the hands-on piece, because that's key often, because oftentimes we'll leave a training and then don't do anything with it. But you actually allowed us to participate so that we can gain that skill right here in the session. So thank you.
Love it. That's my goal. I want accessibility to not be this nebulous, challenging thing that nobody knows how to do when it really is just simple things, simple changes we can make in our processes. And I'm glad you all participated in the activities today. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, if there's nothing else, um, thank you, Brittany. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Megan, thanks for coming on and helping moderate. Alicia, thank you for helping coordinate this. Um, and the rest of you, thank you for coming. Hope the storm is kind to all of you.
Very much. Everyone stay safe. I will share the slides. I'll send them to you via email so that everyone can have the final slides with everyone's responses in them, able to download. So if you have a chapter resource library or anything like that, I'll send it over.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
All
Thank you,
right.
Britne.
Thank you, Britne. Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
You too. Thank you.
Bye bye, all.
Bye.